Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
The sound of praise for your Sunday morning.
The only one who could ever teach me.
Introducing Reverend A.R. Bernard of the Christian Cultural Center.
Was the son of a preacher man.
And Rabbi Joseph Potasnik of Religion on the Line.
The only one who could ever teach me.
Now, on Talk Radio 77 WABC, here's the Reb and the Rabbi, where faith matters.
Good morning, I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
It's Super Bowl Sunday, and I always say Super Bowl Sunday is the equivalent of a Jewish holiday, where you don't pick up the phone, you call people, they're not going to answer, they don't leave the house, they don't get into their cars, they stay home, and they're addicted for how many hours? Was it 2.5, 3 hours?
About that. So will you be attending a tailgate party or what?
I will be with Taylor Swift. She has invited me to be...
You're going to be in her box?
Yeah, in the box there, and... we will enjoy the moment. That's for sure.
Yeah. Winning team? Any predictions?
Who cares?
Okay.
I'm from New England. You know,
who cares?
I mean, I have friends who are very strong Kansas City fans. One of them, Stephanie Gary. She was a cheerleader years ago for the Kansas City Chiefs, and so.
What about the $8 million commercials?
Yeah, and one of them is against hate. The owner of the Patriots has Robert Kraft has spent a significant amount of money over the years on these commercials about anti-Semitism, about other forms of hate, but he's really invested in trying to make a difference. And we've been with him. He's done conversations with Martin Luther King's speechwriter, Clarence Jones.
Right. We were in D.C. for commemoration of Dr. King's gathering. Yeah.
All right. So obviously one of the headlines this week is what's happening in the Middle East. And President Trump has issued his thinking, his vision for Gaza and for the relationship with Israel. Look, people criticize it already. I'll tell you what I think it does. It now puts the onus on people, especially Palestinians, to say, what is it we will do to avoid going elsewhere? What is it we will do to maintain a relationship with Israel? Because the present is unsustainable. Committing yourself to the slaughter of Jews is unacceptable. What is it you're going to do? What changes will you make? And Hamas is, off the table. There's no place for Hamas.
So you think he's, by his words, shifted the conversation?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what he's done. They'll say, you don't like what I said? Well, so what do you say? We know you can't go back to the way it was. Tell me the way you want to go.
So you're saying it was a strategy. It was not just an impulsive.
I think it's an important.
We'll do this. We'll occupy Gaza. You think that it was strategic?
I know it's hard to read what's in someone else's mind, but I think what it does is it forces people to rethink. You can't have a two-stage solution with people who want to kill you.
So you're judging the effect instead of the intent. So regardless of the intention that he had,
right, the
effect is that it shifted the conversation.
Yeah.
The responsibility.
Maybe now we'll talk more realistically and just not talk, in this euphemistic fashion. We're going to live side by side. Well, you haven't, and you rejected every proposal for peace over the years. So tell us what your thinking is.
So there's not going to be a Riviera on the Gaza Strip?
Well, there may be something of that nature.
The Gaza Plaza?
Yeah, the Trump Plaza in Gaza.
Well, think about it. Economics changes the game.
Right.
When people begin to think economically about a situation, they're more open to ideas, especially if they're stakeholders, right? Or will benefit in some way.
Well, I would think that given what Palestinians have chosen over the years and how it has been injurious to their welfare. It hasn't improved their lives. Maybe we got to rethink this. Maybe we just can't go back to the same old because it doesn't work.
That speaks to the extremes because they would have to evacuate in order, for any type of development and construction.
Well, at least it's a conversation. It's a new conversation, hopefully. And hopefully Palestinian people will say our leadership has failed us, right? We're here because, we believed in Hamas. We thought the, commitment to destroy Israel was to our benefit. And here we are.
Or maybe the ultimate, let's work together.
That to me would be a divine human blessing.
Yeah.
So we are, once again, we always look to that day when we'll all the lion and the lamb. Right?
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Although they say in the meantime the lamb won't get too much sleep. But no, we want sane people want peace. Insane people want to destroy.
Yeah.
So rethink it, and I think the president has thrown down the gauntlet. He's given you a challenge. You don't like my proposal? What's your proposal?
Yeah. What's your counteroffer?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? Yeah. You and I were on a talk show, conservative talk show that aired yesterday. And
it was pre-recorded. I just want to make sure people understand.
Of course, it was pre-recorded. That's right. So we don't violate the Sabbath. Absolutely
right.
Well, we recorded it Fact Thursday of this past week. But the conversation was around morality and where we are as a society. I thought you did a great job. You were challenged on certain issues, but I think you did a great job in the conversation.
I have these conversations with my son, and I'll talk about what's written in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Dad, have you read the newspapers lately? It's one thing to quote the Bible, but the book and the movie seem to be far apart from one another. So you and I talk morality, but there's a lot of immoral stuff that is all over. So how do we bring people closer to tradition when some of them not only deviate, they're not even interested, and to many it doesn't matter?
And how do we define morality? There's ethics, which emanates from the culture. These are cultural norms that work within a particular system. But morality is transcendent. It's a covenant relationship of a higher sense, and looks to a greater authority than government or social and political systems. And we all subscribe to it in some way. Yeah. Because even criminals have a certain set of rules.
Well, the Ten Commandments is a good place to begin, right? We can all look at that. And when we say morality, are we talking about absolutes? Is there any flexibility? I mean, thou shalt not steal, right? Now, someone who's desperately hungry, whose family is hungry, and goes in and takes some food, may be seen different than the person who...
Now you're in the New Testament. Right. Now you're in my territory.
Well, once in a while I have to see what the other is saying. But, it's different than the person who goes and robs a bank. So, I think there are ideals, but I think our challenge is how do we synthesize sometimes the real and the ideal. If we only say the ideal, then how do we deal with the real?
Yeah. I think one of the things that came out in the conversation was the need for sensitivity to the other. We could have a set of laws and rules and regulations, but what do we do with that person who doesn't fit neatly into those rules, those laws, those regulations, that framework? And we have a lot of, people within American society who are saying, well, that doesn't fit for me. I as an individual, have other ideas about identity and the fluidity of identity. Me personally, I subscribe to a very specific Christian, biblical, traditional narrative of male and female. But I do believe that individuals who think differently should have the right to participate fully in the social and political life of American society, free from harm or threat or danger. But at the same time, I don't want that freedom imposed on me either, to try to make me subscribe to something that I just don't subscribe to.
No, I hear exactly what you're saying. And what I often do when people talk about the other, I said, wait a minute. Let me give you a specific. The other is a member of your family.
Mm-hmm.
Now talk to me about this.
Yeah.
You know, the member of your family, you're not going to discard. You're not going to expel the person. You're going to try to find room for the person. So we can have our definite views, but there are times we're going to wrestle with our views. Jacob wrestling with the angels. We're going to say, it's my kid. Or my father would say, they're all our kids. So how do we deal with that? You can hold on to your belief, but at the same time be cognizant that there's got to be some room for another who shares a different belief, as long as there's respect for one another.
But are you challenged that you are, in disagreement or are contradicting one of the traditions of your faith?
Well, I think that's a reality. I think we are clear because we know our tradition. This is what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
And, because you choose to be different doesn't mean that I have to change my belief.
Yeah.
Question is, how do we find room for one another?
And how does it play out in human society? We've got a guest.
We do, a very good guest. All of our guests have been very good. Today is someone who's well known to us, and that's the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety. You want to talk about a tough job?
Yeah.
Those of you who want to complain about your job, Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, Chauncey Parker.
So stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Super Bowl Sunday morning and WABC.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
The sound of praise for your Sunday morning.
The only one who could ever teach me
Introducing Reverend A.R. Bernard of the Christian Cultural Center
was the son of a preacher man.
and Rabbi Joseph Potasnik of Religion on the Line.
The only one who could ever teach me.
Now on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Here's the Reb and the Rabbi, where faith matters.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, we have a good friend of ours, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, the former Deputy Commissioner for Collaborative Policing, a Assistant U.S. Attorney, and a great friend. I'm talking about Chauncey Parker, who always takes these easy jobs, collaborative policing, public safety. He looks for the easy way out. And we are very privileged to have you with us on the air, Deputy Mayor. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to our conversation.
So what does success look like? I mean, how do you measure success in your position, public safety?
Well, the North Star is to keep people safe with the lightest touch. So how do everybody cares deeply about safety, and we just need to figure out how to do it with the lightest touch. And so, what success looks like is that nobody is shot in New York City. We had 5 days in a row that nobody was shot in New York City. So it's possible to do all sorts of these public safety initiatives, but the only way to do it is to do it together. And I think it's also to do it creatively. So when I say lightest touch, it can be, the 911 call, but it is also Saturday Night Lights in 140 gyms across the city to make sure that young people have that kind of an opportunity, and lots of stuff in between.
You have a great challenge because in spite of what you do on the ground, you have this idea of people feeling safe or not feeling safe. How do we even quantify that? How do we qualify it? How do you respond to people not feeling safe? The numbers can show statistically that crime is down, better policing tactics are in play. How do we make them feel safer?
It also, when you have the leading story of a newspaper talking about the burning of a woman on a train, an individual being pushed off a platform, that stays with people. And so the following week or 2 weeks later say, well, this week, there were no shootings for 5 days. I think that initial picture is still deeply ensconced in their minds.
Well, I agree with you. I think that the statistics are important. They're important internally. I think it's important to set a very clear goal. Like the goal is, with crime statistic, we want to reduce the number of people who are robbed. We want to reduce the number of people who are shot. And so that internally gets all the different partners to look at the same map at the same time with the goal to see how we're doing. So when we see what we're trying to do is to reduce gun violence in New York City, and we see 5 days in a row that nobody was shot, that's really important. But it's nowhere near enough, because externally, and when we talk to our customers, which are the people of the city, it is so important how they feel. So I think that a part of it is a challenge with social media and a 24-hour news cycle and people, putting a spotlight on the worst moments. And then that's a lot of attention, and that's the way that it is. But I think in particular, what we can do and what we can control is focusing on quality of life. I think what gives people a sense of not feeling safe is sometimes when they see disorder, not necessarily that they're a victim of a crime, but they just see disorder. So that's a big part of what we're doing, is building multi-agency partnerships on to improve the quality of life. There's one of our initiatives is called Every Block Counts, and it's taking 25 blocks in New York City, 5 in each of the boroughs, and building these multi-agency partnerships to clean the streets and to take off the graffiti and cut a branch that may be blocking a camera that's there to protect people. But it's fixing those things that people on those blocks have identified and said, this is what I'm looking for. We're going to the blocks that we're focusing on, the ones that are historically the most distressed as measured by crime rates. And that's where we're focusing. We're working in the subways, we're working in the parks. But I think quality of life is really, really important to give people confidence in government and then a feeling of safety.
Understanding the importance of those partnerships is critical, because now we're talking about building relationships so that there are more eyes on the street, and shopkeepers, people who live in the communities, they all feel a stake in what's happening when it comes to keeping safe streets. I think that is so important. Is it realistic to think that you can have a relationship with media to put a positive influence on the narrative?
I think we can try. We can try to tell the story and tell it in a way that people want to report it. And there's been a lot. I'm going to give you an example. Saturday Night Lights, again, is an example where the mayor took one gym that was all gyms were basically closed in our poorest neighborhoods on Saturday night. One gym was opened in Harlem on 119th Street. Now 140 gyms are open on year round on every Saturday night across New York City. That program, that's good news, and it's also great to get the word out to young people. But that's something that the media is really focused on. I think if we work with them as partners and have stories that they can tell, then it can be enormously effective.
Are there any other platforms available to you to tell these stories, like PSAs? I remember former commissioner, police commissioner, started to work in that direction to try to control the message.
I think that the number one platform with social media is a key one. But I also think, and maybe this is very old school, I think word of mouth might be in many ways the most effective. If their young people go to school and they hear about this phenomenal soccer program in Washington Heights, and then people ask about it and say, we just opened a baseball center, for example, in Washington Heights, the only baseball center in Washington Heights at the Police Athletic League Center at the Armory, but it's a major league baseball center. It really wasn't social. That gym, that baseball center now is open 7 days a week and has kids from all over the community there. It really wasn't social media that drew them there. It was a great product and the word of mouth.
So Chauncey, I call you Chauncey because you're really a close friend of ours. I remember there were commissioners that used to speak of broken windows. Mayors spoke of broken windows, that if we address the small things before they become big things, we can make a major change in direction of crime. I look at fare beaters. You see people who jump the turnstiles, whatever, and nothing happens. There are no consequences. People who walk into, the Duane Reads and Walgreens or whatever, and walk out with merchandise, and nothing happens to them. Isn't that saying that you can get away with it? It doesn't matter. And how do we change that narrative?
Well, I think it's a really, really important point, and for a lot of reasons. One is the perception is that people jump over turnstiles and nothing happens. The perception is that people steal things and nothing happens. That's definitely the perception, but the reality is that oftentimes something does happen, and sometimes that there aren't consequences, or they do it and they get away with it. But that doesn't really matter, because the perception is that people can steal, and that perception is reinforced by the fact that you got to call someone when you're in a Duane Reade. You got to call someone to get the toothpaste. So perception really, really does matter. I think that we're at a point where it's very important, and as part of our social contract as New Yorkers together, what are the rules? And one of those rules is that, I think it's a rule, it must be a rule, you're not allowed to steal. It has to be a rule that you have to pay the fare if you're going to go into the subway system. So I think we need to make sure that we're clear that that's a rule, and that it's in perception, and the reality is that there are going to be consequences if you break that rule. But we have to correct that behavior with the lightest touch. We don't want to respond back to what we used to do, and say you steal and you go to Rikers Island, you jump over the turnstile. You could go to Rikers Island depending on the circumstances. I don't think that's what we want. We have to figure out how to do it with the lightest touch. So are there prevention strategies that we can have? Are there diversion strategies we can have? But if they don't work, we still have to come back to our key mission, which in our key goal and responsibilities, we have to keep people safe, which is we have to not have people jump over the turnstile. We have to not have people steal. But we just got to be very, very creative about how do we do that most effectively.
Yeah. By the way, "Thou shalt not steal" has been around for a while.
You think?
But Chauncey, I hear about the lighter touch, or the lightest touch, and while we're talking about the lightest touch, people are still jumping turnstiles and still doing things that are illegal. What do we do in this interim period? I mean, I think the public wants to see some real consequences for this kind of wrongful behavior.
And Rabbi, I just want to be clear. When I say the lightest touch, I don't mean a light touch. I mean the lightest touch. Sometimes the lightest touch is that someone needs to spend the rest of their life in prison. I just don't think we should use a drop more force than we need to keep people safe. And Sometimes that drop is a very heavy drop, and sometimes that drop is days in jail, that's years in prison, could be even life in prison. But we should be measuring it in a very careful way, is how much force do we need to do to correct the problem, to keep people safe. But whatever we do, we have to keep people safe, no matter how heavy that touch is. But let's try to do it in the most effective way.
Yeah, and you need district attorneys who cooperate.
Yeah, my experience with the district attorneys, all 5 district attorneys, they've been great partners on gun violence strategies. We have a gun violence meeting, for example, with every single morning for over 800 days in a row. All 5 DAs, our 2 U.S. attorneys, 25 different agencies come to a meeting every morning to review the people who drive gun violence. We review that case. We share information. We do everything we can to build the strongest case possible to put those people in jail. And the DAs have been a number one partner from the very first day. And they've been very, very good partners on a lot of these other challenging crimes like shoplifting and petty larceny, the petty larceny. All these we figure it out together, but we're always at the table together. My experience is they've been really good partners.
I want to present something to you because this is very delicate, because you're familiar with the statistics, and the reality is, as you look at the stats, there is an abundance of crime in certain communities, in certain areas, and it's easy for you to be accused of targeting those communities, but it makes sense that you would pay more attention to areas where the crime rate is higher. What happens? How do you navigate that with sensitivity if that's predominantly communities of color,
but Rev,
where the majority of crimes
aren't many of those communities where there's this heavier crime rate? Aren't they asking for more police presence?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. If you talk to, a lot of the advocates who are pushing back against the police, thinking that they're defending, the community. Right. But if you talk to the residents, they want a lot of police presence. Mm-hmm. They want police presence. Right. All right. They want to feel safe in their community. But at the same time, they're concerned about how policing is applied specifically to their communities. Mm-hmm. But our deputy mayor here has the challenge of, not making it look like, those communities are being targeted, but in essence, they're responding to the reality of the statistics. How do you respond to that?
Well, what I respond is that an awful lot of what our response and what our strategy needs to be is what I've learned from both of you, is that we've got to talk to each other. We got to put different voices around the table. To start with, we got to talk to each other. It should not be a mystery what the police department is doing and what all the law enforcement partners are doing is they're focusing. Let's say about gun violence. They're getting the data. They're getting the information about this is where the shootings are. Their goal is crystal clear, which is they want to reduce the gun violence. They want to end gun violence. They're going to have to put together strategies. They're going to have to put together investigations. They're going to have to do it. But we need to make sure that we're communicating to the people who we're protecting and serving, so there's no mystery as to what we're doing or why we do it. And so I think an awful lot of it has to do with communication. Yeah. And I think if all we do, back to our original point, if all we do is tell people that crime is down by this percentage or that percentage, we're not really effectively getting the message across, because that doesn't necessarily resonate. What we need to do is sit at the table that you both have taught me and explain this is what we're doing, why we're doing it, and here are the results.
I'm glad you mentioned that table, Chauncey, because Rev and I have been with you at different tables with members of the clergy, members of the community, and you're one who's not afraid to take questions. You're not one who stays in your office and doesn't go out and talk to people. And I think over the years, that has been a very constructive engagement. People have more confidence in PD when they see members of PD out there. Like you see, communities want to see police on the streets, right? And when they talk about a deputy mayor, I think they feel more confident when that deputy mayor is visible and vocal, and not just issuing declarations from sitting in an office. So you're a communitarian. You're out there in the community, and that's much appreciated.
Well, I remember years ago I was at a community meeting, and with all my great ideas, I was sort of launching into this whole thing, and someone said, do me a favor, don't plan for me without me.
Interesting.
And that was very helpful. So I think it's really important to talk. First of all, it's really important to think of every single person in the city as a customer.
Yeah.
Literally think of them as a customer from wherever whether they live in Brownsville, they live on Park Avenue, or wherever they live. Every single person in the city is a customer. Every single person who works for the city is a public servant, and our responsibility is to do everything we can to serve our customer. And in my world, it is to do everything we can to keep them safe. And the best way you find that out, or many times the best way to find that out, is talk to people. Talk to people who this block, this community, this challenge is different than that challenge. And the only way you get to know, as Brian Stevenson would say, is to get proximate. You got to sit down and have that conversation.
As my father used to say, we're all in retail, right? We're all dealing with the individual. It's not just a matter of being on high or sitting behind a desk.
Yeah,
it's critical.
I'm thinking about the weight of responsibility on the police officer on the ground. They are called law enforcement officers, but in some ways, we're demanding that they be psychologists, sociologists, social workers. Is that fair? Should we even entertain that in the training and development of law enforcement in the academy and ongoing? What say you?
Well, first thing I would just say about police officers, they're truly my heroes because I've seen them in my 40 years, just the bravery, imperfect like all of us, but that they're really the people like firefighters. They're people who will run without hesitation. They will run into the face of danger to protect us. So I will run the other way. They will run toward it, and that's what is in their DNA. That's what's in their social contract, so to speak. I think that I agree with you completely, Reverend. I think that it's not fair. It's also not effective to put all this on the shoulders of the NYPD. Mm-hmm. NYPD, call 911 if a car is double parked or someone's smoking marijuana or there's a person who is homeless or whatever, the radio is too loud. Whatever that issue is, the one number that everybody knows is 911. So they call 911 for everything, and they're not equipped to handle it. And it also is not the most effective way because there's other things that they should be really focusing on, which they're equipped to handle, which is, violent crime or people in distress. That's why this Every Block Counts partnership is so important, is we need to bring these other partners who are terrific, but oftentimes we can be working separately, but sanitation and the buildings department and the transportation department and the parks department, phenomenal public servants. But if we don't work together side by side, oftentimes that call for what is somebody else's lane goes to the police department.
Let's talk about that.
Get addressed. That
public service. Rev and I have had several conversations about getting young people to be more engaged in public service. You've been doing this for some time. What do we say to them? Because a lot of them say, are you kidding? I will not go into that arena. I don't want to be under that microscope. And very often, with social media today, you can say whatever you want without consequences and destroy reputations. Mm-hmm. People become tainted, indefinitely. Why should anybody want to go and do that, what you're doing?
Well, because it's an opportunity to make a difference and to make a profound difference in the life of another person. It's a calling. Like there's other callings, this is that calling. I think the message this kind of goes to both of your points about how do we get the message out about public safety. I think there is we have to do a better job of telling the stories of the great work of police officers, firefighters, other public safety officers. And we give you an example. I just was reading in the paper the other day about a person, you might have seen this, but somebody got was pushed onto a subway platform, was underneath the train, and the train went whizzing by, and they're like within a millimeter is under the track and right next to the third rail. And these EMS workers officers come down, and without hesitation, they save this person's life. But the work of police officers, firefighters, probation officers, corrections officers, this is really the work of heroes. And I think that is very aspirational and inspiring for young people who want to serve in that way. I think it's a phenomenal calling and a great career.
Mm-hmm. A calling, indeed.
Yeah. So the average, I hate to use the word average, citizens saying, I want to do more. I want to have greater input. in the direction of our city, what's a recommendation you would make?
Have high expectations for your city. And that what I mean is if you see literally or figuratively a broken window, call on government to fix it. That is our responsibility. And so I think sometimes people can lose heart and they can think, I'll never make a difference or it'll never be done. And I see this, and again, going back to every block counts. You go onto a block where there's been an abandoned, like Christopher Avenue, where there's been an abandoned lot. It's filled with rats and garbage, and whoever owns that lot doesn't even live in New York City. And you clear that lot and you transform it. It sends a ripple of hope in the community. You cut that branch that's blocking a camera that's positioned right there to keep people safe on their block, and you send a ripple of hope. Mm-hmm. You clean out you fix the pothole. It's, I think, what breaks people's will is they see the same problem over and over again, and they start to lose hope that it could ever get better. But it doesn't take a lot, I think, to start to turn it in the other direction. But it starts by people raising their hand or calling 311 or calling the police department or calling me. I'm looking for just anything I can do that will give them that ripple of hope, because that's where we're going to build from.
Chauncey, and again, I feel strange calling him Chauncey, but we've been friends for so long.
How often do we get a chance to call someone Chauncey?
Yeah. I think back to CPR, courtesy, professionalism, and respect. I had the privilege of sitting on the advisory council at that time. But it's the last major campaign that I know of. I don't mean something like CompStat, but a major campaign where there was outreach to the community and relationship building. Is there anything like that in the immediate future?
Well, I'm a huge fan of our new police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, and her vision for the path forward for the police department, for quality of life, customer service, what you're talking about with CPR, with crime fighting, keeping people safe, just being laser focused on getting everybody to look at the same map at the same time and get the job done and make things better, whether it's quality of life or gun violence. So that I would follow her lead and watch her closely, how she is going to transform our city and our police department with that in mind. And that is a critical part of it. How we treat people is really important. It's a tough job when you're a police officer and you're running from this 911 call to that 911 call. But there's more we can do with training and with support for our police officers and for the community. But I think what you're going to see with Police Commissioner Tisch, that this is going to be a huge priority, all of those initiatives, and she's going to be fantastic.
Can you talk about that meeting you have every morning? I know there's a period of time when you cannot be reached.
Yes, so that's every morning at 10 o'clock. This was an experiment. As Steve Jobs once said, every great idea started with a dream and a blank sheet of paper. This was a dream and a blank sheet of paper. The goal was that nobody gets shot in New York City. Let's start with that. And what I'm going to describe we could do for any challenge that we have in New York City across the board, but this one is about gun violence. And what we do know, if the goal is that nobody gets shot in New York City, we do know whether it's shoplifters or it's gun violence or it's any other challenge, there are a very, very small number of people who cause the problems. And so what this strategy is that there's a small number of people who are repeatedly involved in gun violence, and they're getting out for a variety of reasons, but they may be getting out. And so when they get arrested. So what we created was this system where two detectives start at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they review in the last 24 hours anybody who's been arrested that is gun violence on gun violence. They're out on a gunpoint robbery in the Bronx, and they get arrested with a gun in Manhattan. They're on parole, and they get arrested on a robbery. But it's a very, very small period. It's about 2 or 3 people a day. And so by 7 o'clock in the morning, the list that we're going to be talking about, and that's 2 or 3 people a day, those people are sent out to all our different partners, all 5 DA's offices, there's 25 different partners who get this information. And then imagine they come back at 10 o'clock every morning, right at 10 o'clock, both in person and virtually. We tabletop that case. We say, here's somebody was arrested in the Bronx, out on a gunpoint robbery, got arrested with a gun in Manhattan, and we go around the table. Probation says, well, he's on probation. Well, can you file a warrant? When he was in the Rikers Island or Department of Corrections, people say, well, when he was in Rikers Island, he slashed somebody in the face. That's something that the judge would want to know. And another person says, well, on social media, we have him holding a gun. He says he didn't know about the gun. He's holding a gun on social media. We have one of our domestic violence detectives says, well, he 2 weeks ago, he choked his girlfriend and threw her down a staircase. So it's pieces. Almost imagine that everybody in law enforcement has a piece of the intelligence puzzle, and they're putting it on the center of the table, and that's all going to the DA, who's going to be going to arraignment in the next 2 or 3 hours to present that case to a judge. That started as a blank sheet of paper and a dream, and today we had our 833rd meeting in a row. Wow. 833 meetings in a row. What's extraordinary about it is the power of an idea, the power of a common North Star, that there's no grant, there's not some federal grant that says we'll pay for this or pay for that. If you guys come together, we'll give you extra people. Everybody's using their existing resources, and they come to this meeting voluntarily because they see the power of partnership, and they're amazing. Nobody's in charge. We're all just doing it together, but 833 days in a row, and we're doing it. And I believe if we can do that for people that we want to put into prison because they're hurting people and they're the biggest threats for gun violence, let's create that same meeting for the 14-year-old for the very first time he commits a gunpoint robbery, and not make it a law enforcement initiative, make it an initiative where we work with our partners, do everything you can to get that kid never to get to this other table. Where's that meeting? Yeah. Where's the meeting where people are more passionate about saving the life of that young person before they've committed their 10th gunpoint robbery, and now all we have left is doing everything we can to put them in jail?
That's interesting, because you're talking about building a case against someone who warrants severe response and building a case for the person who doesn't warrant such a severe response by law enforcement or the system. I think that's important.
There's a time for a lighter touch. There's a time for a heavier touch.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. And you think of people, let's say, for example, people who are severely mentally ill. They're well known, as we know. Like they kind of stay in the village, right? Whether it's Midtown, it's this subway station, that subway station, but they're suffering. The city has an initiative like that, and we're going to take it to a whole nother level, which is with these partnerships. This is with public health, and to the extent public safety it can be helpful, but really it's getting all our public health partners together to do everything we can to support that person. But it's really the power of partnership.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Creating a whole new category. I guess, what do we call it? Comprehensive policing?
Yeah. By the way, Deputy Mayor, Chauncey. Rikers Island. We hear the chants, close Rikers Island. And Rev and I were with Judge Lippman at Rikers. It was not a positive reaction to what we saw, but you have a whole take on when people yell, close Rikers. What does that really mean?
Well, this is a project that the mayor has just given me, and I have to say it's the most important project I've ever worked on, and I've had a lot of fantastic projects in my career. This is the most important. And I wouldn't describe the project as close Rikers Island, although Rikers Island is a part of the strategy. This is what the project is. Let's design going back to the beginning of the responsibility of government is to keep people safe. In order to do that, there are times where we have to put people in jail. If we are going to put people in jail, let's design a system, a strategy where people don't go to jail for one more day than is absolutely necessary for safety and justice. If we're going to put people in jail, let's make sure that we design a jail system that is humane. And third, if you're going to design a jail system, let's design a jail system where you're doing everything possible to make sure that the people, when they leave Rikers Island, don't ever come back to Rikers Island. Those are really the three principles that the judge puts, that frames the Lippman Commission, and I 100% agree with it, and we call this initiative Every Jail Bed Counts. And the way we need to do this is to see, in every way possible, how would we create a business plan which is that people don't spend a day more or a day less than is necessary for public safety in jail. The way you would do that is you would have do everything you can to make sure that people, if they don't have to go to jail, with effective supervised release, with electronic monitoring, you'd make sure that those are evidence-based, the best practices possible. People are going to go to jail. You'd make sure that they don't spend 3 years in jail because case processing takes so long for the case processing to go forward. You design a system with all the partners, with our judges, with our prosecutors, defense attorneys, all the different partners, but you'd make sure that the case processing from the day that somebody is arrested to the date that the case is resolved is as efficient as possible, and that we don't waste days, because those are days that, one, are people who are in custody, but they're 2 days at $330,000 a year for a jail bed. If they're going to go to state prison, the better they go to state prison sooner rather than later, as long as it's consistent with justice and safety. But this project is going to be my vision, the mayor's vision, is that we're going to bring the entire village of partners together to look at the same map at the same time to design a jail strategy where people don't spend a day more or a day less in jail than is absolutely necessary. It is the most important thing that I have ever worked on, and I know we can do it. It's complicated, but nothing is more important.
I have to ask you this question, and I'm going to call you Chauncey.
Chauncey.
I'm going to call you Chauncey intentionally because this is a human question. In all the opportunities that we've had to interact and for the number of years that we've known each other, you've always come across as a person who has an anchor for their soul. And I understand that anchor is anchored in your faith. Tell us a little bit about that, would you?
Well, my faith is that that there is a higher purpose for this in our life, however long that life is, but that we have to live a life of a higher purpose. I really believe that. I'm not so sure where, in terms of a particular this faith or that faith. I very much believe in a higher purpose. God is that there is a higher purpose to our life, mm-hmm. and that the most important thing for us is to make a difference. I love the quote by Jackie Robinson, said about the impact of a life is the only thing that's important about the impact of a life is the impact you have on other people. Mm. And I think that's why I love going back to why should people go into public service, be a police officer or a prosecutor or any of these different roles, because it's a chance to impact another life. So I think when I'm done in this life, what I hope to be measured by in a private conversation with whoever that is what difference did you make by the fact that you were here?
Yeah. Well, knowing the two of us might get you like an easy pass.
Well, and I also thought, and Reverend Bernard, you were the one who pointed me to this, but I also love, I think that there are so many brilliant people with great ideas and all sorts of stuff, and we sort of wait for, as Martin Luther King said, wait for somebody, we think that somebody's going to come and save the day, or it can't be this way forever. And I love that book that you pointed me to where, where do we go from here? Yeah. Martin Luther King's final book, but mm-hmm. perhaps we're the ones we're waiting for. I think it's common people like me, I guess like all of us, is that this is the call. We can make a difference even as just ordinary people. There's an awful lot we can do to help if we work together, and we can make a difference.
Chauncey often refers to the North Star. Mm-hmm. In all of his talks,
a moral compass.
I hear about that North Star. And I remember hearing years ago that you have to aim for the stars, because if you aim for the stars, there's a chance you'll land on the roof. But if you only aim for the roof, you'll land in the mud. So it's good to have that higher aspiration. Even if you don't get to that North Star, it points you in the right direction, and you can make a difference.
Yeah.
And finally, I would say this about Chauncey, Rev. I'm talking to him the other day and talking about the state of the city. And what does he do? He quotes for me Pink. Right, Chauncey?
Yes.
By the way, Pink, who's Jewish. I appreciated that affiliation. Could you tell us that last line that has so much meaning?
Well, I do think people talk about, and the work that the three of us have done together of building trust and bridges between the police and the community. And I do think that on the ground that it's almost that there is, I do think of where we do. Sometimes we have tension, we have difficult times, but I do always think about that song from Pink where she says, "Just give me a reason. We're not broken, just bent." and we can learn to love again.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes and it goes back to all the stuff we've been talking about this afternoon, if communication breaks down, we start to presume that we know what other people are thinking or what other people want, we're not going to go anywhere. But if we listen to each other, we know that if you listen to the community, they know firsthand how important the police are. They know firsthand how brave police officers are. The police officers know the challenges that people in some of our communities face, and they're there together. We just got to treat each other respectfully. We got to listen to each other. We got to be effective. We got to not quote a bunch of statistics, although statistics matter. We also have to really focus on what's important to people, what will make them feel safe, what will make them feel appreciated and respected, and that bridge will come together. And again, I'll go back to Commissioner Tisch. I can think of nobody better to be the person to build that bridge, because it is in her heart and her mind to bring all of us together to accomplish what we all want to do, which is to be safe, live in peace, be respectful to each other. So we're on a great path forward.
I can say this because we've gotten to know each other over the years, but you definitely have the intellectual and emotional disposition to make these things, these possibilities become a reality.
I think we can sleep a little bit safer, And I'm going to put that on my door.
I just want to say this.
I know Chauncey Parker.
No, I just want to say this, though, because then you both are extraordinary leaders and so important to the city, and the time where this city was really tested after the murder of George Floyd, and this city could have ripped apart and gone, and you and other key faith leaders. But you told hard truths and made sure that the police department and other partners, that we were all having a real conversation. But you held the city, you helped in many ways, helped hold this city together through your leadership and your faith.
Well, we thank you for
so
that
much.
affirmation.
It's an honor to know you, Chauncey Parker. And we're thankful that you're a deputy mayor for public safety.
Amen.
So am I. Thank you both very much.
Bye-bye now.
And stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on 77 WABC.
Reverend A.R. Bernard, Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, the Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC and the all-new WABCRadio.com.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
You know, Rev, I've often said if all you know about an issue is what you read on the first 2 or 3 pages of the newspaper, you don't know the issue. And listening to Chauncey, it's complicated.
Yeah.
As life is.
Yeah.
It's not, a one-size-fits-all. It's not, one dimension. And he's a person of great intellect.
He's sharp. He gets it. His feet are on the ground. Yep. That's why it's always been a pleasure talking to him and working with him, because he's right. During George Floyd, you and I were involved in quite a few bridge building meetings and trying to lower the temperature.
Serious conversations. Yeah. He would come to the Cardinals' residence. He would also, I think, would come there with Dermot Shea, who's the commissioner, and he would say, "Talk to us.
Yeah.
Let's hear what you have to say, and don't hold back."
Yeah.
And I admire that kind of ability to have candid conversations.
Yeah.
All right, so that was good. I really enjoyed it.
So that's a wrap of another great show of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on 77
And
WABC.
we say that in the most humble fashion.
Of course we do.
And Ava Anderson, our producer, makes this all happen. Thank you, Ava.
Yep. Till next time, God bless.